I did my first reporting on U.S. history and eugenics back in 2007, before I had even begun my research on concentration camps. Back then, I wrote about Carrie Buck,
Now to look at what's been described as one of the worst Supreme Court rulings in history.
who was institutionalized and forcibly sterilized in Virginia a century ago for being what was called feeble-minded.
A poor young woman then confined in the Virginia State Colony for epileptics and the feeble-minded, though she was neither epileptic nor mentally disabled.
I spent several days traveling to sites in Virginia from Carrie Buck's past with Paul Lombardo, looking at how we do and don't remember this history. In 1927, the U.S. Supreme Court upheld her sterilization, with Justice Oliver Wendell Holmes Jr. claiming that, quote, 3 generations of imbeciles is enough.
The decision resulted in 60 to 70,000 sterilizations of Americans considered unfit to reproduce.
Lombardo is an expert on both the legal system and the history of individual rights, bioethics, and law. I reached out to him to ask about the current administration's approach to public health and the degrees to which it echoes the eugenics of the past. Here is his whole reply, because his has been a really essential voice in this field.
I have been studying the history of eugenics since 1980. And during that time, I've heard the term eugenics used to critique new technologies or to condemn racist practices or to highlight discriminatory policies towards people with disabilities, because those activities, those being criticized, might be motivated by the same kind of toxic bigotry we associate with the history of eugenics. Sometimes I thought the analogy was appropriate, other times not so much. But for the first time in my memory, government officials, people in this administration from the top down, invoke the language, sometimes in nearly exact quotation, that was used in the early 20th century to advocate for eugenic policies. They recycle century-old eugenic talking points to stoke fears of immigrants, who they say are poisoning the blood of America, blaming crime, ill health, poverty, and all other social problems on bad genes that generate high taxes. They repeatedly attack opponents, particularly people of color, as low IQ. They argue that the U.S. is under-babied and use pro-natalist talking points to oppose abortion, just as the eugenists shouted race suicide when they talked about abortion, or blamed women for choosing higher education over teen pregnancy. They rail against spending taxes on public health interventions because it would save the wrong people, like children with autism, whom they falsely claim will never pay taxes. It is possible to overuse the word eugenics, but what we are being told to believe from the government today is not merely like eugenics or comparable to eugenics, when an official echoes with precision the same arguments that were used successfully to weave eugenic reasoning into the fabric of American life and law for decades. It is eugenics.